Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Warcraft video. So, the connection between the Burning Legion and the Shadowlands is greater than we knew. This ties back to Kil'jaeden, and then back to the Dreadlords, and then back to Sargeras. It's clear that this expansion will unlock many secrets. Secrets that we have not been able to access before because they're locked behind the Nathrezim Dashlane account. Today's sponsor, Dashlane, is my personal password manager of choice, and it's one that does far more than that, offering dark web monitoring and a VPN plus other features too. You'll get 10% off with my code Bellular at the link in the description. Now, Dashlane will generate high security passwords for all your sites, and then, through its extensions, it will automatically log you in. And that does mean that using best security practices is literally more convenient than doing it manually. I mean, you can now even use Dashlane as iOS's default password autofill, which I've been using a lot. Now, all your info is locally decrypted using your master password, so even if Dashlane was hacked, it would be like breaking into the bank but finding out that the bank doesn't have the key to the vault, so it's super secure. Now, it'll also even alert you if a website that you use has had a data breach. You get all that in one app, and if you follow my link and use promo code Bellular, you'll get 10% off. So a massive thank you to Dashlane for keeping us safe and supporting our team, and with that, let's get into the video. The connection between the Burning Legion and the Shadowlands is even greater than we knew. This ties back to Kil'jaeden, and then back to the Dreadlords, and then even back to Sargeras himself. So yes, we are in for quite the video. First, we need to think about the role of the Lich King. It's not natural. For millennia, Azeroth did not have a Lich King. The Lich King was created by Kil'jaeden and his Nathrezim, aka Dreadlords. After his plans went afoul, Ner'zhul attempted to escape Outland, only to be captured by Kil'jaeden. The Dreadlords took turns torturing him, ripping his soul from his body, and finally Kil'jaeden granted him death in return for service. Now, the description of this is rather curious. Kil'jaeden passed the Orc spirit through death and revived him as a spectral entity. The Orc's consciousness expanded 1,000-fold, granting him extraordinary psychic powers. So, you might be thinking, how could Kil'jaeden do this to Ner'zhul without knowing about the Shadowlands? I mean, the Lich King's power was derived from the Shadowlands. How did he do it? This basically confirms that Kil'jaeden was well aware of the Shadowlands. We, of course, now know that Maldraxxus, one of the realms of the Shadowlands, is the place from where the Lich King called his power. So yes, this was all Kil'jaeden's plan. Now, before we question how deep that rabbit hole goes, we must first turn to the Dreadlords. The Dreadlords, also called the Nathrezim, were originally said to have forged the Lich King's armor and weapon. However, we now know that that's actually not the case. They actually stole those items from the Shadowlands. This was confirmed at BlizzCon. The character who created them, the mysterious smith who operates the Forge of Domination, is a character who we're going to meet in the next expansion, and through him, we're going to find out the true nature of Frostmourne and the Helm. And through that, we will learn why the Nathrezim decided to steal them in the first place and what the implications were. For now, though, this means that the Nathrezim clearly had great knowledge of the Shadowlands. Hell, Frostmourne wasn't even the first runeblade they stole from there. Based on this new lore, we can assume that Apocalypse, the unholy Death Knight Legion artifact, was also stolen from the Shadowlands. According to its artifact research notes, Apocalypse is a thousands of years old runeblade with Frostmourne-like abilities. I mean, it predates Frostmourne by thousands of years. So yes, clearly, the Legion have been aware of the Shadowlands for a very long time indeed. There's even more to the Dreadlords, though. They are described as being vampiric, which is pretty darn similar to the inhabitants of Revendreth. And going through Chronicle, it's evident that they're quite a bunch. They are extremely intelligent, they're demonic in nature, they've got extremely potent magical abilities on par with the Eridar, and that Revendreth connection, that does show you that elements of the Shadowlands have obviously played into their culture and their history, and that there is a link there. So, let's cover that history. It is really important. The Dreadlords are actually responsible for Sargeras turning on the Pantheon. Yeah, they really are. Long ago, a Nathrezim enclave existed on an old god-infected planet that contained a world soul. Now, they are described as basking in the old god's power. So, Sargeras, of course at the time a champion of order, came upon the world and ruthlessly interrogated those Nathrezim, who eventually told him of the old god's nature, that of the Void Lords, and the possibility of a nigh unstoppable dark titan should a planet be corrupted. He then went into a rage, destroying the planet and killing the World Soul. Now the Pantheon chastised him for this, and he stormed off. After a long depression, he decided to unleash the demons that he imprisoned, and he began his Burning Crusade. Yes, the Nathrezim set him on that path. Now what's interesting to me is that those Nathrezim knew more than the Pantheon. Sure, the group there were basking in the old god glory, but we don't know about the others, and given their similarities to the realms of Maldraxxus and Revendreth, and their long mastery over these Shadowlands forged runeblades, you've got to wonder, like, do some of them work with death? Do they understand death? Is that why they dislike Void? Was Sargeras manipulated there? Well, we just don't know yet, but Chronicle does suggest that that enclave of Nathrezim, the ones that he ran into, were indeed taken by the old gods. However, Blizzard recently confirmed that Chronicle is just a Titan account of events, so it could be that these Nathrezim actually did more directly manipulate Sargeras, and if that is the case, then in doing so they would have created the greatest anti-Void force the cosmos had ever seen. Unfortunately, direct records of much of this are actually lost because of Illidan. He destroyed their homeworld Nathreza. Just before he left, he traveled to the city's archive. Now this is something that is described as being their most cherished monument. Now he stole the seal of Argus, but he destroyed the rest. And sadly, the knowledge that went down with that place, well, it likely would have explained much of the Shadowlands, the Void Lords, and perhaps even more. So, Dreadlords, that's their massive cultural link to the Shadowlands. They are demons of the Twisting Nether, but they certainly resemble Maldraxxus and Revendreth. They stole Apocalypse, they stole Frostmourne, and they stole the Helm of Domination from the Shadowlands. Now, we are told that Kil'jaeden turned Ner'zhul into the Lich King, and this means, I think, that the Dreadlords quite clearly passed their knowledge on to Kil'jaeden. Now, Ner'zhul's spirit was bound to the armor, sealed in diamond-like ice, and then cast down to Icecrown. Later, as the Lich King's power grew in proportion to the number of minds under his control, the Dreadlords then constructed Icecrown Citadel. And both these elements of Chronicle have been changed by the Shadowlands expansion reveal. So first, the Lich King powers grew, right, as he controlled more minds. That's very similar to how the Jailer's power increased as more souls fell into the Maw. So it could be that the more minds he has, the more anima he would have wielded in the Shadowlands, therefore he would have been able to draw more power from Maldraxxus, and maybe that's how the Lich King got so powerful. There's another important thing to note though, so as I covered, the power of the Helm increases as more minds are dominated. Now the Helm is called the Helm of Domination. It's named after the Forge of Domination in the Shadowlands, so that's another link. Now there's also Icecrown, which closely resembles Torghast. Now indeed, if you look at the denizens of Torghast, you also then see how they echo design elements of Icecrown and of the Lich King's armor, so there's a commonality there. So how the hell do we tie that together? Well, the Nathrezim are clearly aware of the Void. They're aware of Torghast. They constructed Icecrown in Torghast's image. They even stole powerful armaments from the Shadowlands. So let's deal with the locations here, right? Was Icecrown specifically chosen for its link to Shadowlands and Torghast, or in creating the Frozen Throne and Icecrown, did they tether the Shadowlands to that location in our world? Well, this is where the lore gets messy. The expansion hasn't came out yet. I mean, the first fight of the Lich King, right after he really got established, was the War of Spiders. That was against the Nerubians. Now, they're a group who were resistant to the Plague of Undeath and to the Lich King's telepathic power. They even had rejected Yogg-Saron, as we later find out from Seer Ixit. So, the Lich King was actually said to have been impressed by them, and that he decided to embrace their architecture. Now, this is a little bit odd. You see, we now know that his architecture mirrors that of Torghast, even though we're told in Chronicle that the Nerubians embraced old Tol'vir architecture. So, is that a plot hole, or is that really strange, seeing Titan Servant, you know, Tol'vir architecture being in the Shadowlands? Is that a plot hole? What's going on? Potentially not. We'll explore this more in a future video, but I mean, just compare this shot from the Shadowlands to the Halls of Valor. So there's clearly more going on here than you may think. Now, this Nerubian slash Shadowlands connection, it even seems to appear in more things than just the buildings though. Like in the Warcraft 3 manual, we are told of the sacrificial pits that they would use to sacrifice their enemies. So, you know, they sacrifice their enemies in a sacrifice pit. They're resistant to the Maldraxxus originating necromantic plague and the psychic powers of the Lich King. Now, combine that with them being like fairly smart, and I'd say again, we maybe have a pre-established link between the denizens of Northrend and the Shadowlands, and then a little bit of a link between Titan architecture and the Shadowlands. Now, of course, there's also Kel'Thuzad. Kel'Thuzad dabbled in necromancy after being inspired by the old Horde's Death Knights. Now, like, that makes the Legion link stronger. The first Death Knights were created by Gul'dan years before Ner'zhul became the Lich King. So yes, that means that Gul'dan, a servant of the Legion, was aware of the Shadowlands and was able to manipulate souls. Do you want more proof? Well, you know, after we defeat Gul'dan in the Nighthold, we get the top of his staff, and this is what the flavor text reads. Topping Gul'dan's staff, the headpiece is the symbol of the Shadow Council. With a deep connection to the Shadowlands, it was a powerful instrument in the hands of Gul'dan and his Legion masters. So yeah, the Horde Death Knights were created using Legion knowledge of the Shadowlands. Now, this is what inspired Kel'Thuzad to study necromancy, eventually, you know, ending up serving the Lich King. So we then see how the Nerubians, you know, they seem to have their Shadowlands connections. We see how their corrupted Tol'vir architecture is highly similar to that of, say, Maldraxxus. That's a very interesting twist, again, on the similarities between the Halls of Valor and, say, Oribos or parts of Bastion. So we've constantly seen how the Legion use souls to fuel things as well. Well, what if that's actually using anima? I mean, given all that we've covered thus far, it would not be a stretch. So ultimately, the Void seemingly is the enemy of both death and fel, and we see how the Legion was completely happy to dabble in death in their war against the Void. So with all of this stuff in mind, what is the deal with the Helm of Domination? It was stolen by the Nathrezim, so clearly its power was not meant for them. It was not meant for the Legion, and it was not meant for their puppet, the Lich King, well, their supposed puppet. When Sylvanas says that Bolvar is not worthy of the Helm's power, well, that's what she's referring to. It's not his power. Through Nathrezim knowledge, the Legion were able to subvert the power of the Shadowlands, bending it to their will. The Helm's place on Azeroth was never intended. What it did was never intended. So the power of the Shadowlands, the ability to draw that power from Maldraxxus, that was clearly imbued in the Helm. That's power that had never been on Azeroth before the Helm's creation. So once shattered, that power was clearly no longer bound in the Helm, and clearly in the process, it shattered the veil between worlds. So in a way, Kil'jaeden sort of usurped the Jailer by elevating Ner'zhul, and in doing so, he disrupted the natural order of things, but seemingly, you know, he changed things forever, as the removal of that Helm, the destruction of it, shattered the veil. Now, I believe the Helm's power was only a means to an end for Kil'jaeden. He was a demon lord who never really expected to fail in his mission. The externalities of his interference with the Machine of Death, I don't think they were ever considered, for a legion that successfully claimed Azeroth would not really have had to worry about it, or so they thought. So Kil'jaeden failed, Sylvanas has exposed the damage that he wrought, and now it's up to us to deal with it in Shadowlands. So there you go. That is the Legion Shadowlands connection. A very, very interesting piece of lore indeed. I really hope you enjoyed this video. It was a hell of a lot of fun to put together, so thank you very much for watching it. Let your friends know about it. I'd really appreciate that. And yeah, with that, cheers. I'll see you next time.
Mm-hmm.